Hello and welcome back to Retfurb. So on today's video we've got this Sony TA1150 stereo amplifier from around 1973-74, and we've got this tiny modern LVPIN LPA6 amplifier from Amazon. So the whole idea of the video is to see whether this tiny little modern unit can beat this 1970s beast. So this amplifier was cheap. It was the cheapest one I could find at the time. So it was around £10 I think on Amazon, and you had to buy a separate power supply to go with it, which was about £7 off the top of my head. So £17 for a little amplifier, which, you know, if it is good and it works well, that is an absolute bargain. Obviously this amplifier would probably set you back $250, $300 in good condition. You can find them a bit cheaper than that, but depending on the condition, and this one's in really good condition. I do plan to recap it in the future, purely just as a preventative measure to stop it from sort of any leaking capacitors. I don't want to risk it. It gets used fairly regularly. It's my main amplifier, so I just don't want to risk anything sort of happening to it. But you know, if something like this can beat that, it's a good option for someone to get, other than forking out a lot of money or, you know, having the space to put something like this. So let's get to the video. So what I did was to test both systems up against each other with various different music. Here I am just showing the same song being tested, as I can't play the other songs because of copyright. I also tested on a couple different speakers to compare, but showing them on the Sony SS2030s. Starting with the LVPIN with tone controls on the lowest bass setting, the amplifier sounded not particularly detailed. When adjusting the tone controls together, they just sounded like they increased the volume, not actually changing anything with bass and treble. If you adjust them independently, they do adjust the tones while still increasing the volume. Now, these speakers that I'm actually showing on at the moment, I did have a bit of problem with the bass. If you crank the bass up, it did distort the speakers a little bit, but that's nothing to do with the amplifier. It did that on both the amplifiers, so I was sort of messing around with it a little bit, just sort of seeing what was going on, but it was just the speakers. On the other speakers, they were absolutely fine. So back to the LVPIN, they don't sound great when adjusted, and found it's far better to keep them at the lowest bass settings with regards to tone controls. The sound from the LVPIN is best compared to ever so slightly blocked ears, if that makes sense. It probably sounds really bad, but it just isn't perfectly clear. It's almost slightly muffled, if that makes sense. Now, putting it into perspective of the price, it isn't too bad. Now moving on to the TA1150, straight away the sound is much clearer and crisper. Sound tone controls out of the bass and treble independently as they should, without the increase in volume like the LVPIN. Details are just so much better on the Sony. It really is no comparison, which is what I was kind of expecting. I'm sure a lot of others were also. Obviously the Sony was a high-end system back when it was made, but wanted to see if this low-cost small amplifier could come anywhere close to the older system, which, if I'm honest, it doesn't come close. So I'm not going to talk more about the TA1150, as I have a separate overview video on this, which I will link in the description. Looking closer at the LVPIN, it is a small, neat looking amplifier. The box actually says car amplifier, so I'm presuming it could be used in a car system. It is rated 4 to 8 ohms speaker output and has a 12 volt input for power supply. With this particular amplifier, I had to buy the power supply separately. So the actual amplifier was, I think it was about £10, and the power supply was £7, around about that. So basic inputs on the back and basic controls on the front. The volume knob was rubbing slightly in certain positions when operated, so I'm not sure if this one's just had a bit of a defect when being made. Overall, the LVPIN is a pretty good amplifier for the money. The vintage Sony is much better, but would cost hundreds of pounds more to buy a well looked after one. So when you put the price difference into perspective, the LVPIN is a good budget option. If you're after something that doesn't take up much space, is cheap with okay sound, then the LVPIN is a good buy. But if you're after something which brings better quality, better sound output for higher end listening, then I would look at other options. Thanks for taking the time to watch the video, it's really appreciated. Please like and subscribe, and we'll see you in the next one.